Have you ever held a coin in your hand and wondered if it might be hiding a secret worth thousands of dollars? Imagine reaching into an old jar of spare change, pulling out what looks like an ordinary Jefferson nickel, and discovering that a tiny missing detail has transformed that 5-cent coin into one of the most talked about treasures among collectors. Today, we uncover the fascinating story of the mysterious 1960 no-mint mark Jefferson nickel, a coin that has sparked excitement, confusion, and treasure-hunting dreams for decades. At first glance, the 1960 Jefferson nickel appears completely ordinary. Millions of Americans used these coins every day without giving them a second thought. They bought candy, paid bus fares, and disappeared into cash registers across the country. Yet hidden among the billions produced that year are examples that collectors still search for, hoping to find a valuable rarity hiding in plain sight. To understand why the 1960 Jefferson nickel attracts so much attention, we need to travel back to a very different America. The year was 1960. The nation stood on the edge of a new decade filled with change. John F. Kennedy was campaigning for the presidency. The space race was heating up. Television was becoming a centerpiece of family life. Meanwhile, at the United States Mint, workers were producing coins by the hundreds of millions to meet the demands of a growing economy. The Jefferson nickel itself had already been part of American life for more than 2 decades. Introduced in 1938, it replaced the Buffalo nickel and featured the image of Thomas Jefferson, the 3rd President of the United States. The design was created by sculptor Felix Schlag, whose work won a national competition. On the front, Jefferson's portrait represented one of America's most influential founding fathers. On the reverse stood Monticello, Jefferson's beloved Virginia estate, a symbol of both architecture and history. When the 1960 nickels were struck, they came from 2 primary mints. Coins produced in Philadelphia carried no mint mark at all. Coins struck in Denver displayed a small D mint mark. This simple fact is where much of the mystery begins. Many people hear the phrase 1960 no mint mark nickel and immediately assume they have discovered a rare error coin. But here's the surprising truth. A missing mint mark on a 1960 nickel is actually normal if the coin was produced in Philadelphia. Unlike modern coins, Philadelphia nickels of that era generally did not carry a mint mark. As a result, millions upon millions of 1960 nickels entered circulation without any mint mark whatsoever. So why are collectors still interested? The answer lies in condition, varieties, and the endless possibility of rare minting anomalies. Most 1,960 nickels spent decades circulating through the economy. They became scratched, worn, and damaged. Finding one today is easy. Finding one in pristine condition is a completely different challenge. Collectors place enormous value on coins that somehow survive decades without significant wear. These high-grade examples reveal details that ordinary circulated coins lost long ago. A sharply struck 1960 Jefferson nickel can display stunning features. Jefferson's hair appears crisp and detailed. Monticello's columns stand out with remarkable clarity. Even the smallest lettering remains bold and distinct. Coins preserved in such exceptional condition often command prices far above their face value. Then there is the famous concept of full steps. On the reverse of the nickel, the steps leading to Monticello are an important grading factor. Most nickels were not struck strongly enough to show all the steps clearly. Coins displaying complete, uninterrupted steps are highly sought after. A 1960 no-mint mark nickel with full steps can be dramatically more valuable than an ordinary example. But the story becomes even more intriguing when we enter the world of mint errors. Throughout history, the coining process has occasionally produced mistakes. Discrack. Metal shifts unexpectedly. Equipment malfunctions. While most errors are caught before coins leave the mint, some escape into circulation. These accidental creations often become the stars of the numismatic world. Collectors have discovered 1960 Jefferson nickels featuring double dies, off-center strikes, die cracks, clipped planchets, and other unusual characteristics. Each error tells its own story, a brief moment when the precision of industrial coin production went slightly off course. One of the most exciting discoveries occurs when a collector notices unusual doubling in the lettering or design elements. These double-die varieties can appear subtle at first, requiring magnification and careful inspection. Yet once identified, they can significantly increase a coin's desirability and value. The thrill of finding such a coin is difficult to describe. Imagine examining a handful of old nickels under a lamp and suddenly noticing something different. A letter appears doubled. A design element seems unusual. In that moment, a common coin transforms into a potential treasure. Auction records further fuel this fascination. While average circulated 1960 no-mint mark nickels are generally worth only a small premium over face value, exceptional specimens have sold for surprisingly impressive amounts. High-grade examples certified by major grading services have reached hundreds or even thousands of dollars depending on their condition and rarity characteristics. Full steps examples, in particular, have attracted fierce bidding competition. These sales demonstrate an important truth about coin collecting. Rarity is not always determined solely by mintage numbers. Sometimes rarity comes from survival. Billions of coins may have been produced, but only a tiny fraction remain in near-perfect condition decades later. Another fascinating aspect of the 1960 nickel story is the number of misconceptions surrounding mint marks. Many treasure hunters search through change believing any old coin without a mint mark must be rare. This misunderstanding has led countless people to examine their collections with excitement, only to discover that no mint mark was standard for Philadelphia issues of the period. Yet that disappointment often leads to a deeper appreciation of numismatics. Collectors begin learning about grading, die varieties, strike quality, and mint history. What starts as a simple search for a valuable coin evolves into a passion for understanding history through metal. There is also a certain mystery surrounding coins that have survived untouched for decades. Some were tucked away in bank rolls. Others rested in forgotten drawers, inherited collections, or dusty attic boxes. Every pristine 1960 nickel has its own untold journey. How did it escape circulation? Who saved it? Why was it preserved while millions of others became worn and damaged? Those unanswered questions add an almost human element to coin collecting. Every coin becomes a witness to history. Today, market values vary dramatically. A typical circulated 1960 no-mint mark Jefferson nickel might be worth only a few cents above face value. An uncirculated example can bring several dollars. High-grade certified specimens may reach hundreds of dollars. Exceptional full-steps examples have achieved far greater prices, sometimes climbing into the thousands depending on grade and market demand. This enormous price range explains why collectors continue searching. The difference between an ordinary nickel and an extraordinary one can be remarkable. The challenge lies in identifying what makes a particular coin special. The 1960 no-mint mark Jefferson nickel may not be the rarest coin in American history. It may not have the legendary status of a 1913 Liberty Head nickel or a rare gold coin worth millions. Yet its appeal comes from something even more powerful: accessibility. Unlike many famous rarities locked away in museums or elite collections, the 1960 nickel remains a coin that ordinary people can still find. That possibility keeps the dream alive. Somewhere in an old coin jar, forgotten piggy bank, or inherited collection, a remarkable example may still be waiting. A coin overlooked for decades could hold surprising value. A tiny detail on Monticello steps or a subtle minting error could turn a common nickel into a collector's prize. And perhaps that is the real magic of the 1960 no-mint mark Jefferson nickel. It reminds us that hidden treasures do not always come wrapped in gold. Sometimes they arrive disguised as an ordinary 5-cent coin, quietly waiting for someone curious enough to look a little closer. So the next time you come across an old Jefferson nickel, take a moment before tossing it aside. Examine the details. Check the condition. Look closely at those steps on Monticello. Because in the world of coin collecting, the most exciting discoveries often begin with something everyone else overlooked. And now the question is, if you found a 1960 no-mint mark Jefferson nickel in your pocket change today, would you know whether you were holding an ordinary nickel or a hidden treasure? The year was 1961. America was racing toward a new decade of innovation. The Cold War was at its height, and millions of ordinary nickels were pouring out of U.S. mint presses every day. Most of those coins slipped quietly into pockets, cash registers, and piggy banks. But among them, a few mysterious Jefferson nickels emerged with something unusual or perhaps something missing. Today, collectors across the country continue searching for what many call the 1961 no-mint mark Jefferson nickel, a coin surrounded by confusion, curiosity, and unexpected value. But here's the question that keeps collectors looking through old jars and forgotten drawers. Could a simple 5-cent coin from 1961 actually be worth hundreds, or even thousands of dollars? To answer that, we have to travel back to the origins of one of America's most recognizable coins. The Jefferson nickel first appeared in 1938, replacing the Buffalo nickel that had circulated for a quarter century. Designed by sculptor Felix Schlag, the coin featured the profile of Thomas Jefferson on the front and his famous Virginia home, Monticello, on the reverse. It was a design that would remain a fixture of American coinage for decades. By 1961, the Jefferson nickel had already become a familiar part of everyday life. Millions of Americans handled them without giving them a second thought. Yet behind the scenes, the U.S. Mint was producing these coins at multiple facilities, and that is where the story becomes interesting. During 1961, Jefferson nickels were struck primarily at the Philadelphia Mint and the Denver Mint. Denver-produced nickels carried a small D mint mark, while Philadelphia-produced nickels carried no mint mark at all. And this is where one of the biggest misconceptions in coin collecting begins. Many people hear the phrase 1961 no mint mark nickel and immediately assume they have discovered a rare error coin. In reality, every 1961 Jefferson nickel struck in Philadelphia was intentionally produced without a mint mark. It was completely normal. Yet, despite being common, some 1961 no-mint mark nickels have become surprisingly valuable. The secret lies not in the missing mint mark, but in the condition, quality, and rare varieties hidden among the millions produced. In 1961, the Philadelphia Mint struck more than 73 million Jefferson nickels. That enormous number would suggest the coin should be worth only 5 cents today. And for most examples, that is exactly the case. However, coin collecting has always been about finding the exceptions. When experts examine Jefferson nickels, one of the most important details they look for is the condition of Monticello on the reverse. Specifically, they focus on the steps leading up to Jefferson's mansion. These tiny lines are incredibly difficult to strike sharply. Coins displaying all of those steps clearly are known as full-step specimens. They represent the highest quality strikes and are dramatically rarer than ordinary examples. Imagine 2 nickels minted on the same day in the same facility. One enters circulation and spends decades being exchanged for coffee, newspapers, and groceries. The other somehow escapes preserving every tiny detail exactly as it left the mint. Decades later, collectors discover that pristine survivor and compete fiercely to own it. That difference can mean the gap between a 5-cent coin and a 4-figure collectible. The design itself remains an important part of the coin's appeal. On the obverse, Thomas Jefferson faces left, his profile reflecting both dignity and simplicity. The inscriptions "In God We Trust," "Liberty," and the date frame the portrait. On the reverse stands Monticello, Jefferson's beloved estate. Few American coin designs have remained so recognizable for so long. For generations of Americans, this image became a symbol of continuity, appearing in pockets from World War II through the space age. Yet the minting process that created these coins was far from simple. Large coils of metal composed primarily of copper and nickel were fed into powerful presses. Blank planchets were punched out, heated, cleaned, and then struck under immense pressure between engraved dies. Every strike transferred Jefferson's portrait and Monticello's image onto the metal surface. With millions of coins being produced, mistakes occasionally occurred. Collectors have discovered examples showing die cracks, off-center strikes, doubled features, and other minting anomalies. While dramatic errors are uncommon, they add another layer of intrigue to the 1961 Jefferson nickel story. One particularly fascinating aspect of coin collecting is how rarity evolves over time. A coin may not be rare when it is minted, but decades of circulation, damage, and loss can dramatically reduce the number of surviving high-grade examples. That is exactly what happened with many 1961 nickels. Most were spent. Many were worn nearly smooth. Countless others vanished into landfills, scrap piles, and forgotten corners of history. As a result, superb uncirculated examples became much harder to find than the original mintage figures might suggest. This scarcity fuels demand among serious Jefferson nickel collectors. Over the years, professional grading services have examined thousands of 1961 no-mint mark nickels. While average circulated pieces remain inexpensive, elite examples certified in top grades command impressive prices. Some full-step specimens in exceptional condition have sold for hundreds or even thousands of dollars at auction. The combination of pristine surfaces, strong strike quality, and certified rarity transforms an ordinary nickel into a coveted treasure. These auction results often surprise newcomers. After all, how can a coin that was produced by the tens of millions become so valuable? The answer lies in the relentless pursuit of perfection. Collectors assembling complete Jefferson nickel sets often seek the finest known examples. When only a handful of coins meet the highest standards, competition becomes intense. The coin is no longer judged by its face value or even its mintage. Instead, it is evaluated based on how few equally impressive examples exist. And then there are the discoveries. Stories frequently emerge of collectors finding valuable nickels in inherited collections, bankrolls, or forgotten coin albums. While most 1961 no-mint mark nickels are ordinary, every search carries the possibility of uncovering an overlooked gem. That possibility is what keeps the hobby alive. There is also an enduring mystery surrounding public understanding of mint marks. For years, countless articles, videos, and online listings have labeled the 1961 no-mint mark nickel as a rare error. This misconception has led many people to believe any Philadelphia-struck example is valuable. The reality is more nuanced. The absence of a mint mark on a 1961 Philadelphia nickel is normal. What matters is condition, strike quality, and the presence of any genuine mint errors or varieties. Yet that confusion has created its own fascinating chapter in the coin's history. Some sellers have advertised ordinary examples for unrealistic prices, while knowledgeable collectors carefully separate true rarities from common coins. In many ways, the 1961 no-mint mark Jefferson nickel represents the essence of numismatics itself. It reminds us that value is not always obvious. Sometimes the difference between an ordinary coin and a remarkable collectible can be nearly invisible to the untrained eye. A tiny detail in the steps of Monticello. A flawless surface preserved for decades. A rare striking characteristic missed by everyone else. These subtle distinctions transform everyday objects into historical artifacts. More than 60 years after it was minted, the 1961 Jefferson nickel continues to circulate through auctions, collections, and treasure hunts. It serves as a small metallic time capsule from a pivotal era in American history. Most examples are still worth only a few cents. Some are worth a few dollars. And a select few have achieved values that would astonish anyone who received them in change. That is the magic of coin collecting. A humble nickel, overlooked by millions, can hold a story of craftsmanship, history, rarity, and discovery. It can connect us to the hands that struck it, spent it, saved it, and ultimately preserved it. So the next time you come across a 1961 Jefferson nickel with no mint mark, don't dismiss it too quickly. Look closely at Monticello. Examine the details. Consider its condition, because hidden within what appears to be an ordinary coin may be a remarkable survivor from America's past. And that raises one final question. If you found a jar of old nickels in your attic tomorrow, would you take the time to search through every single one? Or could a valuable treasure slip through your fingers without you ever knowing it? Have you ever held a coin in your hand and wondered if it might be worth far more than its face value? Imagine reaching into an old jar of spare change, pulling out a simple nickel, and discovering that collectors are willing to pay hundreds, or even thousands of dollars for it. It sounds impossible. After all, a nickel is just 5 cents. But hidden among millions of ordinary coins is a fascinating piece of American history. The 1962 D. Thomas Jefferson Monticello nickel. At first glance, this coin appears completely ordinary. It's small, common-looking, and often overlooked. Yet behind its modest appearance lies a story of American craftsmanship, Cold War-era history, collector obsession, and the endless hunt for rare minting errors that can transform a simple nickel into a prized treasure. To understand why the 1962 Jefferson Nickel continues to attract attention today, we have to travel back more than 60 years. The year was 1962. America was in the middle of one of the most dramatic periods in modern history. The Cold War dominated global politics. The space race was accelerating. President John F. Kennedy inspired a nation with visions of progress and exploration. While these major events filled headlines, the United States Mint quietly continued producing the coins that Americans used every day. Among them was the Jefferson Nickel. The Jefferson Nickel series had first been introduced in 1938, replacing the Buffalo nickel. The design honored one of America's most influential founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson. Created by sculptor Felix Schlag, the coin featured Jefferson's portrait on the front and his famous Virginia estate, Monticello, on the reverse. By 1962, the design had already been circulating for nearly a quarter of a century. Americans carried these nickels in their pockets, paid for meals with them, and dropped them into vending machines without giving them a second thought. Yet every coin minted carries a unique story. The 1962 D nickel was produced at the Denver Mint, indicated by the small D mint mark located to the right of Monticello on the reverse side. More than 280 million examples were struck that year. On paper, that enormous mintage should make the coin common and relatively uninteresting. But coin collecting rarely follows simple rules. The obverse of the coin displays a dignified portrait of Thomas Jefferson facing left. Surrounding him are the words, "In God we trust," "Liberty," and the date 1962. The reverse showcases Monticello with remarkable architectural detail, accompanied by the inscriptions E Pluribus Unum, Monticello, 5 cents, and United States of America. Although the design seems straightforward, collectors often spend years examining tiny details invisible to most people. The sharpness of Monticello's steps, the quality of the strike, and even microscopic die characteristics can dramatically influence value. This is where the story becomes truly interesting. Most 1962 D nickels entered circulation immediately after leaving the mint. They passed through countless hands, accumulated scratches, and gradually wore down. As a result, finding a beautifully preserved example today is much harder than many people realize. Collectors place enormous importance on condition. A heavily worn 1962 D nickel may still be worth only its face value or slightly more. However, a coin preserved in exceptional mint condition can command significantly higher prices. The difference between an average coin and a premium specimen may be almost invisible to the untrained eye, yet the value difference can be astonishing. Over the decades, professional grading services developed strict standards to evaluate coins. A 1962 D nickel graded in ordinary circulated condition remains common, but examples receiving top mint state grades become increasingly scarce. This scarcity at the highest grades has fueled collector demand for years. Some of the finest known examples exhibit strong luster, razor-sharp details, and virtually no imperfections. These elite survivors represent only a tiny fraction of the hundreds of millions originally produced. And then there are the errors. If there is one thing that excites collectors more than rarity, it is a mistake. During the minting process, countless things can go wrong. Dies can become damaged. Metal can shift unexpectedly. Coins can be struck off-center. Double impressions can occur. Most errors are caught and destroyed before entering circulation. Occasionally, however, a few escape into the public. These accidental creations often become far more valuable than ordinary coins. Over the years, collectors have reported various 1962 D nickel errors, including repunched mint marks, die cracks, die breaks, and off-center strikes. While not every error is worth a fortune, some can command impressive premiums depending on severity and rarity. The thrill comes from uncertainty. Every time someone examines an old nickel collection, there is a possibility, however small, that a previously unnoticed error coin could emerge. That possibility keeps treasure hunters searching. One of the most fascinating aspects of coin collecting is that discoveries continue to happen decades after a coin was minted. People inherit old collections, clean out family estates, or open forgotten coin jars. Sometimes remarkable finds emerge from places where nobody expected them. Stories circulate throughout the numismatic community about valuable coins discovered in dresser drawers, coffee cans, and forgotten bank rolls. The 1962 D nickel has appeared in many such stories. While most examples are common, exceptional specimens and unusual error varieties occasionally surface, reigniting interest among collectors and reminding everyone that hidden treasures can still be found. Another factor driving demand is the enduring popularity of the Jefferson Nickel series itself. Unlike many rare coins that require enormous budgets, Jefferson Nickels offer an accessible entry point for new collectors. Building a complete set is challenging but achievable. This balance between affordability and difficulty has helped maintain steady interest in the series for generations. As collectors pursue complete date and mint collections, demand naturally extends to high-quality 1962 D examples. Auction results reveal just how much condition matters. Average circulated examples may sell for only a few cents to a few dollars. Uncirculated specimens often bring higher prices, especially when certified by major grading services. At the very highest grades, where population numbers become extremely small, prices can rise dramatically. Some premium quality examples have sold for hundreds and, in exceptional cases, thousands of dollars when they represent among the finest known survivors. For many people, that reality is difficult to comprehend. How can a coin worth only 5 cents become worth thousands? The answer lies in the intersection of rarity, condition, demand, and history. Collectors are not merely purchasing metal. They are acquiring a preserved piece of the past, a small artifact that has survived decades while retaining its original beauty. Yet the 1962 D nickel contains another layer of intrigue. It was minted just before one of the biggest changes in modern American coinage. Within a few years, rising silver prices would force major changes to U.S. coins. The Coinage Act of 1965 transformed American currency and marked the end of silver in circulating dimes and quarters. Although nickels retained their copper-nickel composition, the early 1960s represent the final years of a particular era in American minting history. Holding a 1962 D nickel is like holding a snapshot of America on the brink of change. It existed during the Kennedy years, before the moon landing, before the dramatic coin shortages of the mid-1960s, and before major redesigns reshaped American pocket change. That historical connection adds emotional value beyond any price guide. Perhaps the greatest mystery surrounding coins like the 1962 D nickel is how many valuable examples remain undiscovered. Millions were produced.
Millions circulated.
Millions disappeared into collections, drawers, piggy banks, and forgotten storage boxes. Somewhere, right now, there may be a perfectly preserved specimen waiting to be found. There may even be an undiscovered mint error hiding among ordinary change, unnoticed for decades. That possibility is what keeps collectors searching. The 1962 D. Thomas Jefferson Monticello nickel may not be the rarest coin in America. It may not be made of gold or silver, but its story proves that extraordinary value can hide inside the most ordinary objects. It is a reminder that history often survives in the smallest places. In a pocket, a coin jar, or a forgotten collection tucked away in an attic. And perhaps that is what makes this humble nickel so captivating. The next time you come across an old Jefferson nickel, take a closer look. Examine the date. Check for the Denver Mint mark. Study the details, because what appears to be just another 5-cent coin could actually be a hidden piece of American history. And that raises an intriguing question. If millions of these nickels are still out there, how many valuable treasures remain undiscovered? And could one of them already be sitting in your pocket right now? The year was 1963. America was standing at a crossroads of history. The Cold War loomed over the world. The space race was accelerating, and a nation was about to witness one of its most tragic moments with the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Yet, while headlines captured the world's attention, millions of small coins quietly flowed through cash registers, pockets, and piggy banks across the country. Most people never gave them a second glance. But what if one of those ordinary coins wasn't ordinary at all? What if a simple 1963 Jefferson nickel, especially one with unusual characteristics connected to its mint mark or the famous Monticello design, could hold secrets worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars? Today, we uncover the fascinating story behind the 1963 Jefferson nickel, a coin that continues to spark excitement among collectors and treasure hunters more than 6 decades after it was struck. To understand why the 1963 nickel matters, we first need to travel back to the late 1930s. The Jefferson nickel was introduced in 1938, replacing the Buffalo nickel that had circulated since 1913. The new design honored one of America's founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson, the third president of the United States and the principal author of the Declaration of Independence. Designed by sculptor Felix Schlag, the coin featured Jefferson's profile on the obverse and his beloved home, Monticello, on the reverse. The design was elegant, patriotic, and distinctly American. By 1963, the Jefferson nickel had already been circulating for 25 years. Yet no one could have predicted that some examples from this year would later become the focus of intense collector interest. The standard 1963 Jefferson nickel was struck in 2 locations. The Philadelphia Mint produced nickels without a mint mark. Meanwhile, the Denver Mint struck coins bearing a small D mint mark on the reverse beside Monticello. Together, the 2 facilities produced hundreds of millions of nickels. At first glance, this massive production suggests the coin should be common and virtually worthless. But in the world of numismatics, rarity isn't always about how many coins were made. Sometimes it's about how many survived in exceptional condition. Sometimes it's about tiny mistakes. And sometimes it's about mysteries that remain unsolved. One of the most intriguing aspects of the 1963 Jefferson nickel involves mint mark confusion and so-called no mint mark discoveries. Many new collectors stumble across a 1963 nickel and notice that there is no mint mark visible. Excitement quickly follows. Could it be an error? The answer is both simple and surprising. 4 coins struck in Philadelphia during 1963, no mint mark was completely normal. Unlike today, the Philadelphia Mint generally did not place mint marks on nickels during that era. As a result, millions of genuine 1963 nickels exist without any mint mark at all. However, this is where the story becomes interesting. Over the years, some collectors have reported examples showing weak details, strange surfaces, die defects, and unusual strike characteristics. These varieties transformed otherwise ordinary nickels into sought-after collectibles. Among the most valuable examples are coins displaying full steps. To the average person, Monticello looks like a small building on the reverse. But experienced collectors focus on the steps leading up to the structure. When a coin is struck with extraordinary sharpness, those steps appear fully defined and uninterrupted. These are known as full steps nickels. Finding a 1963 nickel with complete full steps is surprisingly difficult. Despite the huge mintage, many coins were struck from worn dies or experienced heavy circulation. As a result, high-grade full steps examples have become legendary among Jefferson nickel specialists. A coin worth 5 cents in everyday commerce can suddenly command hundreds or even thousands of dollars when those tiny architectural details are perfectly preserved. And that's only part of the story. The minting process itself contributed to the coin's fascination. Nickels are notoriously difficult to strike. Their metal composition, 75% copper and 25% nickel, creates a hard alloy that places tremendous stress on dies. As production numbers climbed, dies deteriorated quickly. This where often produced weak details around Jefferson's hair, Monticello's columns, and the famous steps. Collectors today carefully inspect these areas under magnification, searching for clues that separate common examples from exceptional ones. Over time, several die varieties and repunched mint mark discoveries associated with Jefferson nickels from surrounding years have fueled collector enthusiasm. While the 1963 issue does not possess a single universally famous error comparable to some rare U.S. coins, specialists continuously examine surviving examples for overlooked varieties. This ongoing hunt keeps the coin relevant even decades after its release. Then there is the question every treasure hunter wants answered. How much is a 1963 no-mint mark Jefferson nickel worth? The answer depends entirely on condition. Most circulated examples remain inexpensive. Millions survive, and many are worth only a modest premium over face value. But once condition enters the equation, everything changes. Uncirculated coins with strong luster, minimal marks, and exceptional strikes can attract significant collector demand. Professional grading services have certified certain top condition examples at levels so rare that competition among collectors becomes intense. Some high-grade 1963 Jefferson nickels have sold for hundreds of dollars. Exceptional full-step specimens have achieved prices reaching into the thousands. Imagine discovering one in an old coin jar inherited from a grandparent. That possibility is exactly what keeps collectors searching. Yet perhaps the most fascinating part of the story is not the money. It's the detective work. Every coin tells a journey. A 1963 nickel may have purchased a newspaper reporting historic events. It may have traveled through countless hands during one of the most turbulent decades in American history. It may have sat forgotten inside a dresser drawer while generations came and went. And then, decades later, someone notices a tiny detail. A sharper strike. A peculiar die-crack. An unusual surface. A missing feature. Suddenly, a coin ignored for 60 years becomes an object of investigation. Stories like these have played out countless times in the numismatic community. Collectors frequently report finding remarkable coins in inherited collections, estate sales, old bankrolls, and even pocket change. While dramatic discoveries are rare, they are real enough to keep hope alive. This sense of possibility transforms coin collecting from a hobby into a treasure hunt. The 1963 Jefferson nickel also occupies an important place in American coinage history because it represents the final years before major changes arrived. Just 2 years later, the Coinage Act of 1965 would reshape American currency in response to rising silver prices and widespread coin shortages. Although nickels retained their familiar composition, the coin collecting landscape changed dramatically. The 1963 nickel stands as a snapshot of the pre-1965 era, preserving a moment before those historic transformations unfolded. For serious collectors, assembling high-grade Jefferson nickel sets remains one of the most challenging pursuits in modern numismatics. Many dates appear common until collectors attempt to find examples with pristine surfaces and full steps. Suddenly, rarity emerges where few expected it. This phenomenon has elevated certain 1963 specimens into elite status within the collecting community. Even today, auction records continue to demonstrate how strongly advanced collectors value premium quality examples. While ordinary specimens remain affordable, the finest known pieces can generate fierce bidding competition whenever they appear on the market. That contrast is what makes the coin so captivating. A 5-cent piece can be nearly worthless in one condition and astonishingly valuable in another. The difference may be measured in microscopic details invisible to the naked eye. Perhaps that is the greatest mystery of all. How many valuable 1963 Jefferson nickels remain hidden in old collections? How many sit unnoticed in jars, boxes, and forgotten albums? How many people have unknowingly spent a coin that collectors would eagerly pursue? The truth is that nobody knows, and that uncertainty keeps the hunt alive. The next time you come across a 1963 Jefferson nickel with no mint mark, don't dismiss it as ordinary. Look closely at Jefferson's portrait. Examine Monticello. Study the steps. Search for unusual characteristics. Consider the history carried within that small piece of metal. Because sometimes the most ordinary-looking treasures hide the most extraordinary stories. A coin minted during a pivotal year in American history, passed through countless hands, and overlooked for generations may still have secrets left to reveal. And now the question is yours to answer. If you found a 1963 Jefferson nickel today, would you see just 5 cents? Or would you see the possibility of a hidden treasure waiting to be discovered? Have you ever held a coin in your hand and wondered if it could secretly be worth thousands, or even tens of thousands of dollars? Imagine reaching into an old jar of spare change, pulling out what looks like an ordinary Jefferson nickel, and discovering that collectors across America have spent decades hunting for that exact coin. Today, we're diving into the fascinating story of the mysterious 1964 Jefferson nickel with no visible mint mark, a coin surrounded by confusion, rumors, collector excitement, and surprising value. At first glance, the 1964 Jefferson nickel doesn't look extraordinary. It carries the familiar portrait of Thomas Jefferson on the front and his beloved home, Monticello, on the reverse. Millions of Americans used these coins every day. They bought cups of coffee, paid bus fares, and disappeared into cash registers across the country. But hidden among these ordinary nickels is a story that takes us back to one of the most unusual periods in modern American coinage. To understand why the 1964 Jefferson nickel attracts so much attention, we need to travel back to the early 1960s. The United States was facing a growing coin shortage. Collectors, investors, and ordinary citizens were hoarding silver coins, fearing that rising silver prices would make them more valuable than their face value. The U.S. Mint was under tremendous pressure to produce enough coins for circulation. As a result, 1964 became a remarkable year. The Mint continued striking coins dated 1964 far beyond the calendar year itself. In fact, some 1964 dated coins were produced well into 1965 and even beyond. The goal was simple: flood the economy with coins and discourage hoarding. For Jefferson nickels, the production numbers became enormous. More than 2.8 billion nickels dated 1964 were struck. That's billions with a B. It remains one of the largest nickel mintages in American history. So if so many were made, why are collectors interested? The answer lies in the details. Most people assume that a missing mint mark automatically means a coin is rare. That's true for some coins, but the 1964 Jefferson nickel tells a more complicated story. In 1964, nickels were struck primarily at the Philadelphia Mint and the Denver Mint. Coins produced in Philadelphia traditionally carried no mint mark. Coins from Denver displayed a small D mint mark. That means a 1964 nickel without a mint mark is usually not an error at all. It's simply a Philadelphia issue. Yet this simple fact has fueled decades of confusion. Many people discover a 1964 nickel without a mint mark and immediately believe they found a rare mint error. Stories spread online, videos generate millions of views, and suddenly ordinary nickels become objects of treasure-hunting excitement. But the real story is far more interesting than a simple missing letter. The design itself deserves attention. On the obverse, Thomas Jefferson's portrait was created by sculptor Felix Schlag, whose design first appeared in 1938. Jefferson's calm expression reflects the dignity of one of America's founding fathers. Flip the coin over, and you'll find Monticello, Jefferson's Virginia estate. The intricate architecture on such a small piece of metal remains an impressive achievement in coin design. Every column, every line, and every detail had to be carefully engraved onto steel dies before being transferred onto billions of coins. The minting process was a marvel of industrial efficiency. Blank metal discs called planchets were fed into high-speed presses. Under immense pressure, dies struck the designs onto both sides simultaneously. During the coin shortage, these machines ran relentlessly, producing millions of nickels each day. And whenever production reaches such extreme levels, mistakes can happen. That's where things get truly exciting. While ordinary 1964 no-mint mark nickels are common, certain rare varieties and errors from this year have become highly sought after by collectors. Among the most famous are double die varieties. These occur when the design is accidentally impressed more than once onto a die during its creation, causing letters and details to appear doubled on the finished coin. Some examples show noticeable doubling in the inscriptions, making them valuable collector pieces. There are also repunched mint mark varieties involving Denver issues, off-center strikes, clipped planchets, and other minting abnormalities. Although these errors represent only a tiny fraction of the total production, they can transform an ordinary 5-cent coin into a prized collectible. Then there are the condition rarities. This is where many collectors focus their attention. Because 1964 nickels circulated heavily, finding one in pristine condition is surprisingly difficult. Most examples show scratches, where dull surfaces, and weakened details. A coin that somehow escaped circulation and retained its original luster can command dramatically higher prices than a worn example. The difference between a coin worth a few cents and one worth hundreds, or even thousands, often comes down to preservation. Professional grading services carefully examine these coins under magnification. They assign numerical grades based on condition, strike quality, and surface preservation. The highest grade specimens are incredibly difficult to find. Some premium examples with exceptional quality have achieved impressive auction results over the years. High-grade certified 1964 Jefferson Nickels have sold for hundreds and occasionally thousands of dollars, especially when they possess outstanding eye appeal or belong to rare die varieties. This creates an intriguing mystery for collectors. Somewhere out there, hidden in old collections, forgotten drawers, and family coin jars, pristine examples may still be waiting to be discovered. And discoveries do happen. There are countless stories of collectors searching through rolls of nickels from banks and finding remarkable pieces. Entire communities of numismatists dedicate themselves to examining coins one by one, hoping to spot a rare variety overlooked by others. The thrill isn't just about money. It's about the hunt. Every coin carries history. A 1964 nickel may have passed through thousands of hands. It may have traveled across states, sat in vending machines, crossed military bases, or rested in someone's pocket during historic moments of the 20th century. Yet despite its ordinary appearance, the coin remains connected to a fascinating chapter in American economic history. Another reason the 1964 Jefferson Nickel generates so much discussion is the persistent rumor that all no-mint mark examples are rare. This misconception refuses to disappear. New collectors frequently encounter exaggerated claims suggesting that every 1964 nickel without a mint mark is worth a fortune. The reality is more nuanced. Most circulated examples are worth only a small premium over face value. Their true significance comes from exceptional condition, rare varieties, striking errors, or unique characteristics that distinguish them from the billions of others produced. Still, that doesn't make the search any less exciting. In fact, the possibility that an overlooked treasure could be hiding among ordinary coins is what makes numismatics so captivating. Every collector dreams of finding the coin that others missed. Perhaps the greatest lesson of the 1964 no-mint mark Jefferson Nickel is that value isn't always obvious. What appears common can sometimes reveal extraordinary details under closer examination. A tiny doubling in a letter, an unusual strike, or flawless preservation can transform a humble nickel into a collector's prize. More than 60 years after it was minted, the 1964 Jefferson Nickel continues to spark curiosity, debate, and excitement. It serves as a reminder that history often hides in plain sight, tucked away in everyday objects that most people overlook. The next time you receive change or stumble upon an old coin collection, take a closer look. That seemingly ordinary nickel might not be as ordinary as it appears. After all, some of the most fascinating treasures aren't buried underground or locked inside museums. Sometimes they're sitting quietly in a coin jar, waiting for someone curious enough to discover their story. And that brings us to the question every collector loves to ask. If you found a 1964 Jefferson Nickel with no mint mark today, would you spend it without a second thought? Or would you examine it closely, searching for the hidden clues that could turn 5 cents into a remarkable treasure?